They say Thailand can heal a broken heart. Sunsets, cheap beer, warm hands in the dark. But no one tells you how easily it can break you all over again. I didn't come here looking for love, but love has a way of finding fools. Her name was Lynn, and this is the story of how I almost disappeared, one sweet smile at a time. I wasn't planning to fall in love in Thailand. Hell, I wasn't even planning to stay longer than 2 weeks, just a getaway. A little sun, a little spice, and maybe a massage or two. But then I met her, not on the beach, not in a bar, just a regular massage place down some quiet soi with flickering lights and the smell of lemongrass in the air. She smiled when I walked in, and something about that smile hit me like warm whiskey. Her name was Lynn, short for something longer I couldn't pronounce, but she said I didn't need to. Just Lynn was fine. She had this calm energy, like the world moved slower around her. I told myself it was just a massage, nothing more. But when she touched my shoulder, I swear it wasn't just muscle she unlocked. It was something deeper. I came back the next day, and the day after that. We started talking. She asked about my home, my work, why I traveled alone. I lied a little, like most men do when they're running from something. She didn't pry. She listened. That felt rare. After a week, I wasn't even pretending anymore. I was there for her, not the massage. She laughed more with me. Her hand lingered longer on my arm. She never offered extras. That made her feel different. One evening, after closing time, she walked me to the corner and asked if I wanted to get a drink. I nodded before she finished the sentence. We found some hole-in-the-wall bar with plastic chairs and cheap beer. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it felt like every word mattered. She told me she sends money to her mother every week, said her dream was to open a small cafe one day. I believed her. That night, we didn't kiss. She thanked me, touched my hand, and left, but I was already in too deep. I found a new hotel closer to her place. I started canceling day trips. All I wanted was to be near her. When I finally asked if she wanted to go out again, she smiled like she'd been waiting for me to say it. We became something. Not official, not labeled, but something. And that was enough. For a while. The first red flag didn't even look red. Just a shadow. She was always on her phone. At dinner, during drinks, even when we were watching old Thai soap operas in bed. I asked once. She said it was her sister. I believed her. What else could I do? You don't question someone who holds your heart so gently. You just hold your breath and pray they don't squeeze too tight. After a month, I extended my visa. Told friends back home I was exploring Southeast Asia. Truth was, I hadn't left her neighborhood in weeks. I was paying her rent now, even bought her a small gold necklace she eyed at the night market. She didn't ask. But she didn't refuse either. That's how it started. The slow leak of my boundaries, disguised as generosity. We moved in together. Small condo, cheap fan, a bed too short for my legs, but it felt like ours. She brought her clothes, her little Buddha statue, her perfume that made my head spin. Nights were good, mornings better. She made me coffee with sweetened milk. Sometimes sat on the balcony in silence. I'd watch her and think, this is peace. I didn't know peace could be a setup. She started disappearing for hours. Said she was visiting her cousin. Said she was helping a friend. One night, I asked if I could come with. She said no. Too boring. Next time maybe, but next time never came. I let it go, like a fool, like a man in love, like someone who doesn't want to see what's right in front of him. That's the thing about the heart. It sees what it wants. Then came the night she didn't come home. I waited, called, texted, nothing. Around 2 a.m. the door opened. She was calm. Said her friend had been sick and she stayed to help. No big deal. But she smelled like beer, like cologne that wasn't mine. Her eyes were a little too wide, her story a little too smooth. She kissed me, told me she was tired, slipped into bed like nothing happened. The next morning, she was all smiles. Made eggs, played soft music, like nothing happened. I watched her pour my coffee and wondered what else she could pour without me knowing. The thought made me sick. I didn't drink the coffee, said I wasn't hungry. She didn't press, just kissed my head and went out again. Said she needed space. That word sat in my chest like a stone. I started checking her phone when she was in the shower. I hated myself for it. But love makes spies out of saints. I wasn't looking for dirt, I was looking for peace of mind. I didn't find either. Just endless chat apps. Conversations I couldn't read, names I didn't recognize, emojis, hearts, winks. She had a whole world I wasn't part of, and it lived in her pocket. She started sleeping on the edge of the bed, turning her back to me. No more goodnight kisses, just silence and glowing phone screens. I tried to talk, but she'd shut down. "Why don't you trust me?" she'd snap. "You think I'm like other girls?" I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But my gut had already decided, and guts rarely lie. They just whisper. I called my bank, just to check. I don't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe paranoia. But when the man on the phone told me there were multiple international transfers I didn't recognize, my stomach dropped. Thousands gone. Sent to names I didn't know, places I'd never been. I hung up without saying a word. She came home an hour later, said she missed me, said I looked tired. I asked her where she'd been. She smiled and said, "With friends?" When I didn't smile back, her face darkened. "Why are you always suspicious?" she hissed. "Do you want me to leave?" I said nothing, just looked at her. She stared back. That was the night I realized. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid I'd stop believing the illusion, and I almost did. The account didn't just show transfers. It showed a pattern, always late at night, always just under the alert threshold. She was smart, careful. One went to a woman's name I didn't recognize, another to something labeled Wellness Project. It sounded harmless, but the money was bleeding out. She hadn't stolen it in one hit. She drained me slowly, like a leech. I started leaving cash in the drawer to see if it moved. It did. Not every time, just enough to make me question myself. She'd leave little love notes beside it, like a sick joke. "Buy more cookies, baby?" She was mocking me, testing how far she could push before I snapped. And the worst part? I still didn't leave. I still wanted her to love me, like a goddamn fool. I tried to confront her. I sat her down and asked straight, "Did you take my money?" She laughed. Not nervously, not apologetically, just laughed like I told a joke. "Why would I steal? I'm your girlfriend." Then she flipped it. Accused me of spying, of controlling her. Said I was paranoid and Western men are all the same, always scared of strong women. She stormed out. I sat there staring at the front door, the echo of her words bouncing off the walls. I should have packed, should have called the bank, should have gotten out. But I didn't. I opened her drawer instead, found a second phone. Thai language only, full of messages, dozens of names. One guy calling her my wife, another begging for her return. My hands went cold. The days blurred. I stopped opening the curtains. The sun felt offensive, too bright for a man sinking in shadows. She came and went like a ghost, sometimes warm, sometimes ice. I never knew which version would walk through the door, and I didn't ask. I stopped asking, because every time I tried, she'd turn it on me. "Why are you always so dramatic?" she'd whisper, like I was the broken one. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, watching the blue glow of her phone reflect off the ceiling. Her fingers danced across the screen, silent and fast. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe TikTok, maybe her sister. But then I'd catch glimpses. Foreign names, hearts, phrases I couldn't translate but didn't need to. Language doesn't matter when betrayal is that loud. I stopped calling my friends. What was I supposed to say? That the woman I loved was slipping through my fingers like water? That I was too afraid to confront her because I might lose her completely? I started drinking more. Cheap Thai whiskey, straight from the bottle. It burned, but it numbed the edges, made it easier to pretend everything was still under control. She'd come home smelling like places I hadn't been. Bars, perfume, strange aftershave that didn't belong to me. I noticed marks on her arms, bruises, scratches. When I asked, she shrugged. Just drunk girls at the club. I wanted to believe it. I needed to. Because if I let myself believe the other possibility, I might never come back from it. One night I followed her, not far, just to see. She said she was visiting her aunt. I stayed 3 steps behind her in the dark, down unfamiliar sways. She wasn't going to see family. She was going to a hotel. A man opened the door for her. She kissed his cheek, smiled. The same smile she once saved for me. I stood there frozen. watching her disappear into a room I'd never be invited into again. I didn't go home that night. I walked for hours, no direction, just heat and concrete and buzzing neon. Somewhere near Sukhumvit, I sat on a curb and lit a cigarette I didn't want. My hands were shaking. I could still see her face in my mind, smiling for someone else, a face I thought I knew better than my own. That night, something inside me quietly broke. No explosion, just silence. By morning, I was back in the condo. She was already there, in the kitchen, humming, wearing one of my shirts, like nothing had happened. "Where you go last night?" she asked, not even looking at me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My voice was buried under rubble. She poured me coffee. I stared at it for a long time. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of poison. I was afraid of pretending it wasn't real. I packed my bag that afternoon, slowly, not hiding it, just folding shirts like a man leaving a hotel. She watched me. Didn't say a word. Not until I zipped the suitcase. "You don't have to go," she said, almost softly. But her eyes weren't asking me to stay. They were daring me to leave. I waited for tears, a fight, some desperate confession. Nothing. Just silence. And that damn smile. I left the key on the counter. Walked out without looking back. The street was loud and bright, but I couldn't hear anything. Everything felt muted, like I was underwater. I checked into a cheap hotel near the river, the kind with one light bulb and a slow fan. And I sat there, staring at the wall, trying to remember who I was before her, before all of it. The next day, I called the bank, reported the fraud, froze the accounts. The woman on the phone asked if I wanted to press charges. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was too late. I'd already paid, in more ways than money could measure. I hung up, took a shower, let the cold water hit my face like truth. That was the end, not with a scream, with a click. The days blurred again. Only this time, it was a different kind of numb. No more hoping, no more checking my phone, no more watching the door. She was gone. Or maybe I was. The man who had walked into that massage parlor weeks ago, he didn't exist anymore. I had loved a fantasy, fed it, watered it, watched it rot in my hands. I thought about going back home. Europe felt cold just thinking about it. Sterile, predictable, but at least it wasn't cruel. Not like this, not like her. But something in me resisted. Not because I wanted to stay in Thailand, but because I wasn't ready to face the questions. "How was your trip? Are you still with that girl? You look tired." I spent my days walking, along the river, through markets, down alleyways with no name. Bangkok never stopped moving, and neither did the ache in my chest. But somewhere between the noise and the chaos, I started breathing again. Just a little. Just enough to remember I was alive. Even if I didn't quite know what to do with that life yet. One night, I found a rooftop bar. Not the fancy kind. Just plastic chairs, warm beer, and a view of the city lights trembling in the heat. I sat alone, watching the skyline burn orange. A man next to me struck up conversation. German, first time in Thailand. "Any tips?" he asked with a grin. I looked at him for a long moment and said, "Don't fall too fast, and never hand over your password." He laughed. Thought I was joking. Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. I never told him the full story. He didn't need it. Some lessons only stick when they come wrapped in pain. I wished him luck. We toasted to nothing, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not a big one. Just enough to remind myself that the muscles still worked. I started writing again. Just notes. Little pieces of thought. Not about her, but about me. The things I'd ignored. The things I'd given away too freely. I realized it wasn't just her fault. I'd wanted to be loved so badly. I handed over the keys to my life without asking what the price was. That's the part no one warns you about. We all want the fairy tale. The soft hands, the gentle voice, the fantasy that someone will see all your cracks and love you anyway. But in places like this, where neon mixes with desire and everyone's selling something, it's easy to mistake performance for passion. I didn't fall for her. I fell for the role she played, and I paid the ticket price in full. Some nights, I still think about her. Not with anger, just emptiness. The kind that comes after a storm, a quiet where there used to be thunder. I wonder if she ever really cared. if any of it was real. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the lesson isn't about her at all. Maybe it's about me. About learning to leave when something starts to rot. I never saw her again. Never tried. Bangkok's a big city when you're invisible. I heard through someone that she moved to Phuket. Some other guy, another life. Maybe he'll be smarter. Maybe not. Maybe none of us are. Maybe that's why we come here, to disappear into something beautiful, even if it eats us alive. I stayed another month, then flew out quietly. No goodbyes, no posts, just me in a window seat, watching the city shrink below the clouds. I came to Thailand for a story. I got one. Not the kind I wanted, but the kind I needed. I lost money, time, a version of myself I'll never see again. But I gained something heavier, something that stays with you long after the plane lands. Truth. So if you ever find yourself walking through a quiet street in Bangkok and a smile catches your heart, slow down. Not every hand that reaches for you wants to hold you. Sometimes it just wants to see what's left in your pocket. And sometimes the most dangerous thing in Thailand isn't the heat or the hustle, but how easy it is to believe a lie when it smiles like love. If this story made you feel something, leave a like, drop a comment, and hit subscribe. More stories like this are coming. And trust me, you won't want to miss the next one.